If something bad happens, are you the type of person that sees it as just that, something bad that happened? Or are you the type of person that sees it through the lens of opportunity? This week, we're focusing on mindset. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about perspective.
You know, I'm reminded when you talk about perspective and seeing things as just bad or an opportunity. I'm actually reminded about when my mom passed. I read a book right before we got that news, and it really challenged my mindset on perspective. I realized that I had measured myself a lot compared to where I wanted to be in life, not necessarily to how far I had come. And because of that, I beat myself up a lot. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate, us perfectionists out there. But I remember reading this book and shifting my perspective. Now, 2 years prior to my mom passing away, she had been hospitalized with COVID, and they had to resuscitate her multiple times. All the doctors were saying that she shouldn't have even walked out of the hospital that time. So when she passed, it was unexpected, of course. It was sad, of course. It's never an easy thing. But I remember, because my perspective had shifted, I didn't look at what I was missing. I was able to walk through that season with such an appreciation and a gratitude for the 2 bonus years that we got. And for the 2 more years of memories that we got to have. And it was all because I changed my perspective. When it comes to perspective, it's really the mindset of how you're choosing to look at things. You could measure yourself against an ideal. And if you measure yourself against an ideal, against an outcome, day 1 of this fast, we talked about, where do you want to end it? All right, that's great to know how you want to finish. But if you're comparing where you are now to where you want to be, then you're always going to fall short. Versus, we're on the end of day 1, which means I'm 1 day further than I was yesterday. If I compare myself to where I started, now I have something to be grateful for. Now I have something to track progress against. So it's a perspective switch. And there's another way to measure that as well. And that's between having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, whether I'm seeing everything as an opportunity to learn, or am I seeing everything as a test of my capacity, a test of my performance, a test of my ability, a test of my worth.
And a growth mindset specifically within the category of fasting. Someone who has a growth mindset views opportunities of difficulty as opportunities to grow. They believe that hard work leads to growth and success. They accept feedback as a tool for growth versus seeing it as a personal attack. They celebrate others' successes and use it as a point of motivation for themselves. And lastly, they see failures as a learning opportunity, and they see mistakes as a natural part of growth. On the other hand, there's a fixed mindset. Someone with a fixed mindset avoids challenges. They prefer to be in their comfort zone. They give up easily, and anytime there's a failure, they see it as evidence for why they weren't good enough to do that in the first place. They ignore feedback and they reject constructive criticism and take it as a personal attack. They're threatened by others' success and they feel insecure or envious. They assume that traits like intelligence or talent are innate or unchangeable.
I actually relate to that a lot, and I'm cringing a little bit, but because I'm not measuring against an ideal, and I can see how far I've come now, so I can appreciate that. But man, I remember, I was one of those kids that everything came pretty naturally to me. I was, school was never a challenge. Sports were never a challenge. I was never clumsy. I was always like top of the class and top of the sport. But I had this mindset developed that I was good or better than everybody else just because I was. Just because I was better than everybody else.
Yeah.
Which meant, while other kids were developing work ethic, while they were developing study skills, while they were developing good practice habits, I was coasting off of my natural ability to perform well out of the gate. And as soon as they caught up to me and inched their way past me and I was no longer the best, without fail, every time I quit the sport, I stopped studying.
Wow.
I would change what I was doing because I said, if I'm not the best, this must not be what I was created to do. So let me go find what I am created to do. And it's taken me, decades to now unlearn that mindset.
that fixed mindset. That's a great example. I want to point something out about a growth mindset. A growth mindset, which I don't know if you knew this, is directly parallel to a faith mindset.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right? So let me give you a story from the Bible that really demonstrates how a growth mindset is a faith mindset and how both of those lead to results. So in 2 Kings chapter 4, so in this chapter, there's a widow. She goes up to Elisha. She explains to him that her husband has died and that creditors are coming after her for a debt that her husband owed. Elisha then says to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have of value in the house?" She said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house except a small jar of olive oil." Then he said, "Go borrow containers from all of your neighbors, empty containers, and not just a few. Then you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out the oil you have into all of these containers, and you shall set aside each one when it is full." So guess what she did? So she left him and shut the door behind her and her sons, and they were bringing her the containers as she poured the oil. When the containers were all full, she said to her son, "Bring me another container." And he said to her, "There's none left. The oil has stopped multiplying." This is where there's a growth mindset. So I want to focus on the verse that she specifically explained to Elisha, "I have a small jar of olive oil." At that point, her mindset could have gone to growth mindset or could have gone to fixed. Fixed mindset would have looked like, I only have this. I cannot get more out of this. This is all it is. This is where it ends. And Elisha, having told her, "Go borrow containers from all your neighbors so that you could fill them up," she could have looked at him with a fixed mindset and said, "What's the point? I only have a small jar. There's no point." And right there, she would have totally blocked her blessing. She could have blocked her blessing with a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
But instead, she had a growth mindset. And now, if you notice, she didn't say anything. Elisha told her to go borrow the containers. And what she did was she went and she shut the door. She didn't say a word. She didn't explain anything. She just went. And so a growth mindset doesn't have to be loud, but action has to follow your growth mindset.
That's good. That's real good. That'll preach.
So this woman went, she shut the door, and she poured out from the small jar, because her jar is still small, poured it into the container. And this is where faith and growth mindset are attached together. Because in order for her to have a growth mindset, she had to have faith. She is looking at the tiniest bottle of olive oil, and she is pouring it into large containers that her sons have now collected. So she has all these large empty containers in front of her, and she's pouring this small jar of oil. And here's the most beautiful part of a growth mindset. When you have a growth mindset, you are so full of opportunity, so full of faith, that it then will fill the jars of the people who bring them to you. So this woman was not just filling her own jar, but she had her sons bringing her jar after jar. And guess what? She filled every single jar because she had the faith and the growth mindset to fill it. You want to have your growth mindset be so sharp, so secondhand nature, that you're looking for opportunity after opportunity. When something negative happens, you're so in the positive, so ready to have faith in those moments that you just keep going and say, "Bring me another. Bring me another." And your faith and your mindset is so strong that somebody has to tell you, "We ran out. We have no more containers."
You know what that reminds me of? A little financial stat for you. More millionaires become millionaires during an economic crisis than during any other economic period of time. In fact, the word crisis, the Japanese symbol, there's actually two symbols that represent that word. One of them means emergency. One of them means opportunity. Which means anytime that there is a crisis, we have a choice to make. Will this be our downfall, or will this launch us to a new level? And it all is based on which perspective are we choosing to see this situation through.
That's good.
So as you guys are fasting, we want to give you 2 tips on how to experience breakthrough when it comes to your perspective. Tip number 1, don't measure yourself against where you want to be. Measure yourself against where you started, and be grateful for how far God has taken you and how much growth has already happened within you. Number 2, when bad things happen or when you're faced with difficult circumstances, Don't see them as tests of your ability. See them as opportunities for growth, and be thankful that as far as God has taken you so far, he can take you even further. God bless you. Happy fasting.